Welcome to this explainer. Today we're doing something really special. We are unpacking a dimension that is built entirely, and I mean literally from the ground up, out of love. We're drawing directly from the fascinating research of Sachin J. Karnik to explore a very specific, deeply profound spiritual realm known in the Vedic traditions as Goloka Vrindavan. But we aren't just skimming the surface here. We're diving straight into its ontology. Now, in philosophy, ontology is just the study of being, of what fundamentally exists. So today we are going to look at the actual foundational building blocks of divine sweetness. To give you a real glimpse of the intensely emotional destination we are heading toward today, consider this defining characteristic from the source material. Goloka's existence is saturated with Ananda Chinmaya Rasa, which translates to spiritual conscious bliss. We are talking about an existence that isn't just physical, or even just conceptual, but one that is completely soaked in an unbroken ecstasy of relationship. It's a massive concept, right? But don't worry, we're going to break it down step by step. Okay, here's our agenda for the explainer. First, the meaning of existence. Then, the three forces of reality. Third, hiding majesty for love. Fourth, the personification of bliss. And finally, number 5, the ultimate dessert menu. All right, let's jump right into section 1, the meaning of existence and the foundational states of reality. So if we really want to understand a realm of pure sweetness, we have to start at the absolute bedrock of reality. We first need to grasp 3 fundamental states that make up the divine. First up is Sat, which simply means existence. It represents the baseline truth that something is real. As the research points out, whatever exists is true, and whatever is true exists. Now, even our physical, material universe, with its physics, chemistry, and biology, it possesses a kind of Sat. But it's a lower energy truth. In the context of the divine, Sat represents the absolute eternal truth. It's the pure foundational state of being itself. Think of it kind of like the base code of a spiritual universe. Next, we have Chit, which elevates that basic existence by injecting it with absolute consciousness and awareness. And this is where things get truly fascinating. We're not just talking about basic brain function here, or biological sentience, or human psychology reacting to stimuli. No, in this spiritual context, Chit is a brimming internal manifestation of pure spiritual wisdom and recognition. It is the deep cognitive awareness that actually illuminates existence. It's an active, vibrant knowing that gives incredible meaning to the simple fact of being. And finally, there's Ananda. This is the pure, limitless bliss that completely saturates the spiritual trinity. Ananda is absolutely not just a fleeting emotion. It's not a temporary high or a quick dopamine rush. It is unbroken, infinite spiritual ecstasy. It's essentially the joy of existence experiencing its own perfection. Together, Sat, Chit, Ananda, these 3 form the intrinsic spiritual potency of the divine. Just let that concept of infinite spiritual ecstasy sink in for a second, because next, we're going to see how these states actually function in practice. Moving right along to section 2, the 3 forces of reality and how they build the spiritual realm. Now, what's really, really interesting about this is how these abstract states don't just sit there passively. They aren't static. The divine possesses an intrinsic power, called a Swarupa Shakti, that activates these 3 states, turning them into highly dynamic forces. It brilliantly illustrates the architecture of the divine's power. So existence becomes Sandhini, consciousness becomes Samvit, and bliss becomes Hladini. The state of Sat activates into a potency called Sandhini to actually create the abode. Chit becomes Samvit to organize exactly how beings think and recognize each other. And Ananda becomes Hladini, which actively generates supreme ecstasy. Let's take a closer look at exactly what these potencies are doing. To put it simply, Sandhini builds the actual environment. It provides the literal ontological ground for things like the Yamuna River and Govardhan Mountain. It maintains and manifests all the incredible variety of the spiritual world. The flowers, the trees, the pathways, the houses, all of these are direct manifestations of this existential potency. They absolutely aren't just illusions. They are spiritually concrete. And this is exactly why calling Goloka merely a state of mind is completely inadequate in this theology. It is a real, tangible, vibrant abode built out of pure spiritual existence. Meanwhile, you have Samvit. Samvit ensures that the liberated beings recognize each other and the divine through the lens of deep relationship rather than terrifying awe. I mean, think about it. Imagine trying to hug the omnipotent creator of the cosmos. Kind of intimidating, right? That's exactly why their consciousness is deliberately organized around intimacy.
A mother thinks of the divine simply as her child. A friend thinks of him as just a dear buddy. They don't have to forcefully strip away the concept of God in their minds. Their direct, intense relational knowledge simply overwhelms the practical significance of his supreme majesty.
Which brings us to Section 3, Hiding Majesty for Love. This is the divine workaround for intimacy. Let's see how all this builds a really unique problem that requires a fascinating divine workaround. You see, if you are interacting with the all-powerful, omnipotent creator of infinite universes, it naturally creates an atmosphere of deep reverence. But reverence, actually scratch that, awe, is a massive roadblock to true intimacy. The crucial point here is that overwhelming majesty crushes intimacy. That means true, sweet closeness requires hiding that divine supremacy completely. If you're constantly paralyzed by the awe of God's infinite power, you can't exactly joke around with him or playfully steal his lunch. The highest love just cannot unfold under the constant, heavy pressure of overwhelming majesty. So how does the divine fix this? Well, the texts explain that a force called Yoga Maya steps in. It acts as a veil of selective non-awareness, a sort of divine blinder, if you will, stripping away the practical significance of God's majesty so that love can actually flourish. Yoga Maya is the ultimate arrangement mechanism. Without it, the whole emotional ecology of friendship, jealousy, reconciliation, and romantic anticipation would just collapse under the sheer weight of cosmic omnipotence. Because of Yoga Maya, the intimate sweetness becomes the dominant force, completely regulating the prominence of supreme power. All right, Section 4, the personification of bliss. We're looking at the metaphysical center of Goloka now. This brings us to the absolute core of this spiritual realm. We've talked about Kladini Shakti, that bliss potency. But in the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, we get a profoundly beautiful reveal. And here is the major ontological distinction. In this theology, this energy isn't just some invisible floating force field. It actually has a face. Radha is not a separate, conditioned soul who somehow worked her way up to the top. No, she is the direct transformation of Krishna's own internal love and bliss potency. She and Krishna are one metaphysical reality, dynamically experiencing themselves. I absolutely love how their dynamic is broken down here. Think of it like this. Krishna is the ultimate object of love, while Radha is the supreme bearer and abode holding that intense love. The texts refer to Krishna as the Vishaya, the target, the one who is being tasted by love. And Radha is the Ashreya, the ultimate container, the bearer and the supreme embodiment of that very love. When love reaches its absolute highest, most intensified essence, it's called Mahabhava, and Radha is described as the very embodiment of Mahabhava. Together, they are the metaphysical center of Goloka, eternally tasting one another through this incredible dynamic spiritual expression. And what is truly amazing here is that even the intimate companions in this realm aren't separate random beings. They are essentially electrical expansions of Radha's own supreme ecstatic energy. The ancient text, the Brahma Samhita, describes these companions, the Sakis, as intimate expansions fundamentally connected to Radha's own ecstasy. Think of it like a massive power generator sending electricity out to countless light bulbs. The source is exactly the same. These companions are beautifully participating in and constantly expanding upon this concentrated bliss. Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, and honestly my favorite part of the explainer, the ultimate dessert menu. So, we've gone through some pretty heavy ontological concepts today, right? Potencies, manifestations, relational dynamics, but what does it all actually feel like? Karnik's research offers a brilliant everyday analogy for us. Think about going to a specialty restaurant where you completely bypass the regular meal because they only sell highly concentrated, intensely flavorful desserts. Normally, a menu gives you basic sustenance, your spiritual meat and potatoes or your cosmic broccoli. But here, you skip all of that. There's a reason we say save room for dessert, right? Because sweets offer such a concentrated, intense taste experience compared to the rest of the meal. The researcher brilliantly points out that Goloka is just like this dessert menu. It's a realm where all the standard awe and majesty of the universe is hidden, leaving only concentrated relational sweetness. The universe, the creation, the omnipotence, that is the regular menu. But in Goloka Vrindavan, they literally don't even serve that. The majesty is entirely off the menu, handled somewhere else. For the spiritual seeker, this means the ultimate destination isn't about cosmic management. It's about an intense, highly concentrated taste of sweetness, completely unburdened by awe. And that leaves us with a final, really profound provocation from the source material. If you were entirely immersed in this Ananda Chinmaya rasa, this spiritual, conscious bliss experienced through deep, completely uninhibited relationship, why would you ever want anything else? Honestly, who cares how universes are created when you are tasting the absolute concentrated essence of love? It's just a fascinating, beautiful lens through which to view the ultimate spiritual destination. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive today, and keep seeking those answers.